If I had known what was waiting behind that door that day, maybe I wouldn't have walked in. I wouldn't have sat silently on that couch, watching a stranger rest her hand on my father's shoulder and smile like she'd just won some kind of game. But I was just an 8-year-old kid who had just lost her mom and was trying to survive in a world that suddenly felt cold as ice. I didn't know that from that moment on, every memory of my mother would begin to disappear from our home. Each photo frame, each painting, each trace of her. And I certainly never imagined I'd become a stranger in my own house. My mother, Karen, died of ovarian cancer just after I turned 8. It was the kind of loss no one can prepare for, especially when she had been the heart of our family, the one who made our home feel like spring, even in the snowy chill of December. After the funeral, my father, Richard Blake, quietly turned into someone else. He wasn't the cheerful man who used to read me fairy tales at bedtime anymore. He grew withdrawn, silent, his eyes always fixed on some distant place I couldn't reach. I used to believe that grief would bring us closer. I was wrong. Just 3 months after Mom passed, he introduced me to a special friend, Allison. She was his colleague at the law office, and from the first moment I saw the way her eyes clung to everything in our home, I felt a chill run down my spine. Allison will be joining us for dinner. She's very nice, my dad said, his voice gentle like he was reassuring me, but also like he was giving an order. That dinner was suffocating. Allison laughed too loudly, served food to my dad like they'd lived together for years, and didn't even bother to ask me what grade I was in. I stayed quiet, eyes fixed on the cold food on my plate. Feeling something inside me slowly crack. 2 months later, my dad and Allison got married in a small ceremony in the suburbs of Albany, New York. I wasn't asked. I didn't get to pick a dress. I didn't even know about the wedding until I was shoved into a car and driven to the church. "Allison is your new mother now," my dad said, as I stood hesitating in front of my mom's old bedroom door. A room now repainted a bland beige, stripped of everything that had once belonged to her, like she never existed. I didn't respond. I just stared at the wooden cabinet that once held our family photos. Now it displayed shiny new wedding pictures, with Allison beaming like a queen. My mother was no longer on the walls, on the shelves, or anywhere. One day, I secretly opened the old storage drawer and found all her photos, notebooks, and jewelry crammed into an open cardboard box, shoved in a dusty corner of the attic. I told my father, "Stop digging up the past, Zoe," he said sharply. "Allison is the new member of this family. We need to move forward." But how could I move forward when my entire life was being smothered by a woman who always smiled fakely and whispered behind my back that I needed proper discipline? Allison started laying down house rules: no shoes by the door, no TV for more than 30 minutes a day, no closing my bedroom door without permission. She checked my backpack after school, called me lazy if I got a B instead of an A, and always said things like, "If your mom were still alive, she'd be ashamed of you." I cried a lot. But eventually, I learned to stay quiet, to live like a shadow. I thought if I behaved well enough, if I was good enough, maybe Dad would notice. Maybe he'd remember his promise to Mom, that he would love and protect me. But that moment never came. Every time I complained, he would say, "Listen to your mother, Zoe, she's doing everything for you." And that's when I knew my childhood officially ended that summer. The moment I was forced to call a woman who didn't love me, Mom. I still remember the day Allison told us she was pregnant. She placed her hand on her belly, her eyes sparkling like she was talking about a miracle. While I sat frozen at the breakfast table, spoonful of cereal stuck in mid-air. My dad looked like he had just won the lottery. He squeezed her shoulder and said something I'd never forget. "Finally, a real family." I was only 10, but those words cut through my chest like a knife. What about me? What was I then? An inconvenient memory? A leftover trace of the woman they were trying to erase? From the day Allison got pregnant, I became nearly invisible. Every conversation in the house revolved around her growing belly. When Dad came home, he didn't ask about my day at school. He only worried whether Allison had eaten enough, if she had cramps, or if her back hurt. She began using pregnancy fatigue as an excuse to avoid everything, and I became the one doing it all. Washing dishes, doing laundry, vacuuming, scrubbing the floors. Allison needs to rest, Dad said. You're grown now, Zoe. Help your mother out. Mother? Since when did I have to call her that? Then Emma was born on a bone-chilling winter day in suburban Albany. I stood outside the delivery room, face pressed against the glass, watching my father cradle the tiny baby in his arms like a treasure. He had never looked at me that way. Zoe, you're a big sister now, he said, the smile never leaving his face. Will you help Mom take care of the baby? I nodded. Not because I wanted to, but because I was too used to not being allowed to say no. But nothing prepared me for how my life would be pulled into a spiral of unfairness from that moment on. Allison started using me as her personal babysitter. Emma was hungry? I fed her. Emma had an accident? I changed her diaper. Emma cried at night? I rocked her to sleep. I learned to mix formula, to sing lullabies, to calm a flailing baby in the middle of a tantrum while my classmates were going to the movies or attending summer camp. And Allison? She painted her nails, went to the spa, and told her friends, Zoe just loves the baby. She volunteered to help. Volunteered? I tried to push back. Once, I begged my dad to let me attend my best friend Hannah's birthday party, just for a few hours, after caring for Emma non-stop for 3 weeks. Emma's teething, sweetheart. Allison cut in, her voice syrupy sweet. She needs someone familiar around. If Zoe leaves, who will comfort her? Isn't Allison her mom too? I asked, the first time I ever talked back. My dad's reply left me speechless. Don't be rude, Zoe. Your mother has sacrificed a lot for you, don't be selfish. My mother? Since when did someone who never hugged me, never even asked how I was, get to be called that? Emma grew fast, and in no time, she learned how to manipulate people too. Any time she didn't get her way, she'd scream at the top of her lungs, throw herself on the floor, then point at me and yell, "Ellie hurt me." At first, Allison pretended to soothe us both. But it wasn't long before she fully embraced her role as the outraged mother. Each time, I'd be locked in my room for the entire weekend. No TV, no phone, no dessert. I still remember the day Emma spilled a whole carton of grape juice on the new rug. I had been studying in my room, but when Allison screamed, I was dragged into the living room like a criminal. She's jealous, Allison declared. Zoe can't stand that her little sister is more loved. Emma stood behind Allison, biting her lip, then shot me a smug look, a 4-year-old who already knew that a few simple words could turn me into the villain. And my father always took his wife's side. Always. Zoe, you need to be more mature, he said robotically. Emma's still young. You shouldn't be jealous. I wasn't jealous, I was just tired. Too tired to keep pretending I was fine. Pretending I was loved. Pretending I still belonged in this family. But I stayed quiet, still cooking porridge, picking up toys, and washing Emma's tiny dresses. Because I knew that any time I pushed back, I'd be labeled stubborn, selfish, ungrateful. I lived like that until I was 15, like a shadow next to that spoiled child. But I had no idea things were about to get much worse. I don't know how I would have survived without Grandma Rose. She was my mother's mother, the only one who kept any trace of my mom alive in the faded wallpaper fantasy world Allison had built. Every weekend, my dad dropped me off at her house, like fulfilling a duty rather than wanting me to feel loved. Grandma Rose's house was another world. A small wooden home on the edge of Albany, with lavender bushes around the fence and jazz music playing from an old radio every morning. There, I was sweetheart, eating pancakes with honey, without being scolded for too much sugar, allowed to speak loudly and be listened to with a full heart. Just look at you, she'd say, brushing my hair with worried eyes. Skin and bones like a coat hanger. What do they feed you over there? Aya shrugged. How could I explain it all, when just hearing Allison's name made my chest ache? Days at Grandma's were the only days I felt alive. I baked, painted, read the books my mom used to love, things I wasn't allowed to touch at home. Emma came with me once, just once. That day, she threw a fit, demanding ice cream before dinner. When Grandma said, "There's no rule here that rewards tantrums," Emma screamed, slapped the table and threw herself on the floor. I braced myself, expecting Grandma to explode. But she didn't. She stood there, arms crossed, and said slowly, "I raised a wonderful daughter. I won't tolerate a rude child like this in my house." Emma's face turned pale, and when we got home, she told Allison everything. I had guessed there would be consequences, but I never imagined how brutal they would be. "Do you know my child cried the entire night?" Allison screamed in my grandmother's face, right at the doorstep, not even pretending to be polite. "You have no right to raise my child with your outdated ways." "Then who will raise Zoe?" my grandmother shot back, her voice sharp as a knife. "Or were you planning to drain her dry and toss her aside like a rag?" My father stood there in silence. No defense, not even a glance in my direction. That very evening, he called me to the living room. "From now on, you're not allowed to go to Grandma's house anymore," he said, like he was announcing something ordinary. I was stunned. Why? What did I do wrong? Allison feels uncomfortable with her meddling too much, and Emma doesn't get along with Grandma Rose. "But she's the only one in this house who loves me," I shouted, letting the emotion burst like a fire long suppressed. "Don't be disrespectful," my father barked. "If you try to see her again, you'll be grounded until the end of the term." I backed away, my heart pounding like a drum. I looked at him. The man who once promised my mom he'd protect me. Now telling me to stop seeing the only person who still remembered who my mother was. From that day on, all contact with Grandma was cut off. Allison checked my phone every week, searched my backpack like a cop patting down a suspect. Weekends became a nightmare of babysitting Emma and cleaning the entire house in silence. I tried writing letters, secretly asking a classmate to deliver them, but I got caught. Allison ripped the letter up in front of me, sneering. "That old hag is toxic. This girl doesn't need her. She needs to focus on working, not living in fairy tales." I was locked in my room for 3 days. No books, no phone, no light beyond the dusty window pane. I sat curled up, whispering to myself, trying to remember the scent of her cinnamon apple pie, the sound of her slippers shuffling on the wooden floor, and the raspy laugh I loved so much it hurt. Every night, I dreamed I was running through her lavender garden, racing toward her sunlit porch, only to be yanked back by an invisible cord tightening around my wrist, refusing to let me go. I didn't know then that this was just the beginning of something even worse waiting ahead. I counted down every single day until graduation. Not because I loved school or couldn't wait to wear the gown and get my diploma, but because to me, it was the only escape route. A way out of that suffocating house where I was nothing more than an unpaid servant to the little Princess Emma. I still remember the feeling of wearing that navy blue cap and gown, standing quietly among the loud crowd outside Albany Central High's stadium. My father didn't take pictures with me. Allison only showed up because my dad insisted, and Emma sat in the car, whining about the wait. After the ceremony, instead of celebrating like other families, I was summoned to the living room like a suspect, awaiting a verdict. Dad was already seated, his face heavy. Allison stood behind his chair, arms crossed, her eyes radiating something all too familiar. Control. "Zoe, sit down," he said, without looking at me. I sat. My hands gripped the diploma like it was the last thing keeping me sane. "We need to talk about college," he began. I nodded, heart filled with hope. "I applied to NYU and got accepted. I have a partial scholarship. I just need the remaining amount from Mom's fund, and I'm good to go." Allison curled her lip. "The thing is, we've reconsidered how that money will be used." I frowned. "That money is my mother's. She left it for me. No one else. My father leaned forward, voice flat like he was reading a sentence. Emma also deserves a future. She'll be attending a good school and she'll need that fund. You should be more realistic. I jumped up. What? I don't deserve a chance? What about the promise you made to Mom? You said you'd keep that money safe for me. Allison cut in coldly. You don't get to make demands here, Zoe. This house doesn't operate on your fantasies. I turned to my dad, my voice shaking with rage. So, all these years I endured everything for what? Just to be robbed of my future too? You're being ungrateful, my dad growled, and for the first time in my life he looked at me like I was the enemy. If you can't show appreciation, then get out of this house. Tonight. No hesitation, no regret. I let out a bitter laugh, tears streaming down my face. So now it's out in the open. I was never really part of this family. Just a body that lived here, worked for free, without a voice. Enough! Allison shouted. Pack your things, and leave. I ran to my room, heart aching, tears blinding me. I stuffed a few outfits, my phone, Mom's old letters, and the necklace Grandma gave me. The only thing I had left after all these years. Emma stood at the door, holding her new iPad, raising an eyebrow. Where are you going? Finally getting kicked out? I looked at her. No sadness left. Just emptiness. Enjoy it. You're the last one who still believes this family is real. I walked down the stairs without turning back. When the door shut behind me, the June night wind slapped my face like a wake-up call. I stood there a long time under the faded streetlight, not knowing where to go. I had no place, no money, no one. Except one person. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling. Even though she had been banned from contacting me, I still remembered the number. I dialed, whispering a prayer. Hello? Grandma Rose's voice answered, raspy but strong. I burst into tears. It's me, Zoe. I have nowhere else to go. There was a pause. Then she said the one sentence I will never forget. All right, sweetheart, come home to Grandma. I arrived at Grandma Rose's house just before midnight. The porch light was still on, as if she knew I'd come. When she opened the door, I ran into her arms like the 8-year-old I used to be, buried my face in her shoulder and cried like never before. She didn't ask many questions, just whispered, You're home now. 3 days later, I started my life over. From zero. No money, no school, no clear plan. But for the first time in years, I felt like I had a choice. Grandma Rose, with the firm voice of someone who had lived long enough to reject injustice, said clearly, They will not destroy your future. Your mother dreamed of seeing you in college. Now I will help make that dream real. I didn't want to be a burden. So I started job hunting that very first week. Every afternoon, after walking all over Albany with a resume printed at the public library, I knocked on the doors of diners, bakeries, and bookstores. On the 5th day, I stopped in front of a small corner restaurant, Maple and Sage. The storefront was cozy, the menu handwritten, and the smell of grilled meat drifting from the kitchen was mouth-watering. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. The manager, Connie, was a woman in her 40s, with red hair and eyes sharp as razor blades. Ever worked in a restaurant before? She asked, flipping through my resume. I shook my head. I learn fast. And I need this job. Really need it. Connie stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right. Start with the dinner shift. Don't break anything. And just like that, I became a waitress. The uniform was a black button-up shirt, a wine-colored apron, and a permanent smile, even when my knees went numb and customers snapped because their appetizer was 3 minutes late. I worked 6 days a week, night shifts, from 4 in the afternoon to 11 at night. I always came home with burning feet, and the smell of fryer oil stuck in my hair, but I felt alive. No more contemptuous stares from Allison. No more vicious glares from Emma. Just me, and a tray full of plates I had to deliver at lightning speed. One evening, at the end of August, while wiping down tables, I overheard a group of college students at a nearby table talking about the night program at Albany City College. One of them was studying business administration. Working and studying, with classes running, either from 8 in the morning to noon, or from 6 to 9 in the evening. I went home, opened Grandma's old laptop, looked up the information, and couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I knew exactly what I wanted. A college degree, a second chance, a real beginning. The next day, I told Grandma Rose. She didn't ask why. She only asked, how much? Tears welled up in my eyes. You've already done so much for me. Not enough, she interrupted, her gaze firm. I saved up that retirement money. It's not for admiring. It's for changing your life. I enrolled in the morning classes so I could keep the evening shift. Every day started at 6 in the morning, with a strong cup of coffee and textbooks stacked higher than the table. I studied math, economics, principles of management. At noon I grabbed a sandwich in the library, then caught the bus to the restaurant. I dozed off on textbooks, skipped dinners, and cried while walking because I was too exhausted to remember my way home. But I never wanted to quit. Because I knew? Every word, every formula, every page I studied was a perfect payback for the years they tried to crush me. I was no longer the old Zoe who cried behind closed doors. I was Zoe, the nighttime waitress, morning student, and survivor. And I knew one thing for sure. The time would come when I wouldn't just survive, I would win. I had just finished my shift when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number popped up. Hi Zoe, just wanted to give you a heads up. Emma just booked a graduation dinner at your restaurant. She's bragging about showing everyone her poor waitress sister. Melanie R., my mom's old friend and our former neighbor. I stood frozen in the back kitchen of Maple and Sage, gripping my phone, my throat as dry as sandpaper. Emma. That name sliced through every memory I'd tried to bury. For months, I had blocked every social media account linked to my old family, but word still got around. Photos of Emma in designer dresses, driving a new car, posing in front of a fancy university, all paid for by the money my mother had left for me. The money they had stolen without remorse. And now, that girl wanted to bring her whole group to my workplace. For what? To mock me? To prove I was the failure and she was the pride of the family? No, absolutely not. I walked straight into the manager's office, where Connie was reviewing the weekend reservation list. Connie? I said, my voice unnaturally calm. Can I see the Saturday night booking list? She didn't ask many questions, just leaned aside and typed a few keys. And just like the message said, Emma Blake, party of 10, graduation celebration, requests server, named, Zoe. The last line hit me in the gut like a punch. Connie glanced at me. Who is she? She used to be my half-sister, I replied. And she's trying to turn me into a joke. Connie frowned. Want me to cancel the reservation? I shook my head, a small smile tugging at my lips. No need, I've got a better idea. Saturday night arrived fast. The restaurant was glowing as usual and everyone was busy. I changed into my uniform, but not the servers. I wore a simple but elegant black dress, my hair neatly tied up, high heels on, and pinned carefully to my chest, a new name tag. Zoe Blake, Operations Manager. I had been promoted 2 weeks earlier. A well-earned reward after nearly 2 years of non-stop work and completing my night school business program. I stepped out of the office and scanned the restaurant, which was packed with dinner parties. And then, I saw them. Emma entered first, wearing a blazing red dress and walking like the floor was her personal runway. Behind her came Allison in an elaborate white suit, and my father, looking older, with noticeably grayer hair. Emma's friends giggled, phones already in hand to capture the so-called glorious moment. I stood behind the bar, watching them walk to the reserved table near the fireplace, the best seat in the house. Excuse me, where's our server? Emma said loudly, making sure everyone heard her. I specifically requested my sister. She still works here, right? A few curious glances turned my way. I took a deep breath and stepped out with the most confident stride I could manage. Good evening, I said with a professional smile. I'm Zoe, the operations manager of the restaurant tonight. If you need anything, please feel free to let me or our service staff know. The atmosphere dropped instantly. Emma froze. What the? She stammered. You're the manager here? Since 3 weeks ago, I replied. Thanks to strong academics and a little humility. I gave a quick glance toward my father. Allison grabbed Emma's hand and forced a smile. Oh, that's wonderful, Zoe. Still in the service industry though, right? Yes. And I'm also working toward my MBA, I said, smiling sharply. Unlike some people who live off someone else's money to buy dresses and show off cars. My father opened his mouth to say something, but I had already turned away. Enjoy your dinner. And don't forget to try the signature steak. I'm the one who trained the chef for that dish. I walked back behind the bar, hearing murmurs of confusion behind me. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to live better than them. And tonight, I had. Emma wasn't done. Right after I introduced myself as the manager, she shattered the silence with a mocking laugh, like she'd just heard the most ridiculous joke. Then, in front of all her friends and the guests who were now curiously watching, Emma put her hands on her hips and raised an eyebrow. Manager? Then how about you, dear waitress? Bring out the wine. And stand up straight, will you? We wouldn't want people thinking your restaurant hires from a homeless shelter. I felt every stare land on me. A few awkward chuckles came from Emma's table, but most of the room stayed silent. My staff had started pausing too, glancing from behind the bar to see how I'd react. I calmly walked toward their table, stopping just a few steps away. Emma, I said, my voice low but clear enough to carry across the still room. I'm not your server anymore. And I'm not someone you get to boss around, like when I was locked in that house. Her eyes widened. Allison leaned forward slightly, clearly trying to intervene. But I wasn't finished. I'm a co-owner of this restaurant. 35% of the shares are in my name, thanks to the investment of someone who believed in me when my entire family turned their backs. I turned and signaled for the door in the back to open. And then, Grandma Rose stepped in. She didn't have to say a word. Just the sight of her slender frame, white hair pinned up, and those classic leather shoes gave me a strength nothing could shake. Emma's entire table fell silent. Grandma Rose walked straight to my side and placed her hand on my shoulder. Her voice rang out, sharp as a blade but full of love. That's right. I'm the one who put up the money, because I saw something none of you ever did. The grit and strength in this granddaughter of mine. She looked directly at Richard. My father. You once promised my daughter you'd protect Zoe. Instead, you handed her future to a selfish child and threw her out with nothing. Allison shot up. That's enough, you don't have the right to lecture us. Grandma Rose cut her off, her eyes cold as steel. I have every right when I'm the one who rebuilt the future you tried to destroy. Emma's face turned bright red.